All right, do you
Hello.
want me to kick us off then? Is this everybody here?
We're here. That was smooth.
That was really smooth.
And I was going to say, a lot smoother than the last time I tried.
I always think that if you play it laid back and play it cool, it can never go wrong, right? If you try and make it look really slick, then you'll always feel like you're failing. All right. Wow. For everybody that's watching, we've got people that are joining us now. This is obviously for Alcohol Awareness Week, which is this week, right? Which is very exciting. But we're going to talk about what it means to be a COA in the workplace today, right? And how that kind of shows up in the workplace. So let me just introduce myself. For anybody that doesn't know who I am Josh Connolly. I'm an ambassador for Nacoa, and I volunteered with Nacoa for 10 years now. And very grateful and proud to have done so. And I sort of work in the well-being space in my day-to-day life. What I'm going to do, rather than me trying to introduce you all, I'm just going to go around my screen and get you all to briefly introduce yourself, and then we will start posing some questions. So Jess, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Jess Frost. I'm a specialist coach for adult children of alcoholics, and I am the co-founder of an organisation called the 3E Space. And we essentially help individuals, communities, workplaces to cultivate emotional agility, self-leadership skills, and the psychological safety for all in the workplace. So really excited for this chat.
Right up your street, this conversation
Right
then.
up
Good.
my street, mate.
And Sarah, let's come to you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Drage. I am an ambassador for Nacoa. I'm the co-host of the COA podcast hosted by Nacoa, and I am a mental health ambassador, or mental health advocate even, and a COA advocate, raising awareness around the effects of alcohol addiction on loved ones.
Cool. Good. And Shakila?
So my bio is slightly shorter. My name's Shakila. I am a volunteer for Nacoa. So I'm new to Nacoa. I just started this year. And yeah, I mean, I'm here because I'm in the workplace as a child of an alcoholic. So from my own personal experience, come here to sort of share light on for children of alcoholics who are in their day jobs and how we get around it.
Yeah, good, good. And look, I'm really interested to see where the conversation goes today, but I think anybody that does get the opportunity to watch this may be quite surprised at many of the ways that they're showing up in the workplace as a COA, right? Just quite how far reaching they'll go. So, look, we're trying to have a bit of a general conversation. I'll try and manage it the best I can. But look, if anybody wants to interject with stuff, then please feel free to do so. I'll keep my eye on the chat for the people that are in here watching. If you want to ask a question, the best way to do it is in the Q&A section, all right? That's easier for me to keep up with than keep trying to skip through the chat. But for now, I'll post some questions. We'll jump through them. And then if questions come up, I'll keep an eye on them. We'll either save them to the end or I'll throw them in if I think that they're needed. So the first question that I'm going to ask is around alcohol. And how do you think workplace attitudes towards alcohol have changed? And let me pose that, Sarah, to you first.
I don't think they have changed, if I'm honest. And I'll give you an example. My husband works for corporate and has been sober for the last 6 months. And no reason for it. He's decided that, you know what, it's not serving me well. I don't need it. I don't enjoy it. And the amount of flack and grief that he's gotten from colleagues and co-workers about how it's not manly to be sober and how the stigma attached to it. So I don't necessarily think, in my experience and coming from corporate myself, I don't think it has changed significantly. Even on LinkedIn, I find that when you try and navigate a conversation around alcohol addiction in general, or anything to do with alcohol in the workplace, it's like crickets on there. I mean, it might be different for you, Josh, but for me, when I talk about it on LinkedIn or when I've engaged in any kind of conversation, I feel like there's it's a huge taboo subject for people to engage with. And I think a lot of people are scared to engage in talking about it. I feel like the moment people start admitting they're sober in the workplace, or they start talking about it, I think people are worried that people will automatically assume that they have a problem. So I don't actually think that, I mean, that's probably not the right answer that you're looking for, but I don't necessarily think, in my experience, a lot has changed around it at the moment.
I'm not looking at, there's no right or wrong answers. Let me be clear about that. No,
I mean, that's
no
just
right.
my 2 pence worth. I mean, I'm open. It might have done somewhere else, but from what I'm seeing, I don't think it's changed much.
All right. Shakila, what about you?
So, I mean, I think again, it depends on where you are. So, I say this as someone who works full time Monday to Friday, but also works part time as a second job in a pub. So, again, there are different values in which by where, you know, in the workplace, people do ask questions and they do. One thing I have to say in terms of the workplace that I'm in now, it was something I've always been sort of worried to talk about. But I think, given obviously now I found Nacoa and the way that you talk about it, I think if the workplaces has things like where they care about the mental health, so my workplace where I am now has mental health first aiders. You know, we have an emergency, we have an emotional sort of EAP plan. So there are lots of conversations that are open, and I think if you work somewhere in a close knit environment, then I do feel like there is comfort around it, and I do think people are less worried. I think it's hard to say in terms of a taboo subject because, of course, it is. I think we all know from experience that it's a subject where people who are talking about it feel just as uncomfortable as those who are listening to it. So I think it's that mutual understanding that, you know, there's no harm in talking about it, but also giving people who are around the understanding of how to handle those conversations. Because, you know, when someone says they're sober, what is the right thing to say? You know, do you ask questions? Because is that what that person is asking for? You know, no one wants to say they're sober and be told that they've got a well done on the back. But I think sometimes if you say I'm sober and someone just says okay, then where does that conversation go? That is an awkward non-burner, a non-starter for both sides. So I think it does depend, and I think again it depends on who you're talking to and the environment in which you're talking to them, which I think is the difference.
Yeah, and there probably could be some more education around that stuff, right? But then I think that what you're talking about is quite like it's different for every individual as well, right? Because I'm somebody who's sober, and I've always liked people asking me questions about it, right? But I do see some people that talk about sobriety online who don't. They don't want people to ask them. Do you know what I mean? So I do think it's different for different people. Jess, what about you?
I agree so far with what everyone's saying. I think it's such a complex issue, and you're talking about getting a load of humans together, aren't you, with loads of different lived experience and opinions in the workplace. I think the stigma is real. I think if I reflect on my own experience, right, and I left the corporate world nearly 5 years ago, when I left, I was finally in a situation where I was comfortable requesting zero alcohol drinks when it came to like Friday drinks, which was a really comforting thing to see. I think I know organisations and workplaces where it's just a taboo subject. They just won't go near it, or it would just be seemed totally alien for you to want to go sober, right? And also, I speak to other COAs who tell me some really beautiful experiences of their workplace that really are trying really hard to create change, have difficult conversations, introduce more workplace wellbeing plans. So I think it would be unfair to say there's no change, but I think it's kind of like it's happening on a lot of micro levels, I think. So
Yeah.
I think there's some real good advocates out there, and big up everyone that's having the conversations, and like you say, whether people are listening or not, I think it's incredible. But yeah, I'd like to see more, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I think it like when you take into account what everybody said, I think it also depends what industry you're in, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I used to work in a factory, and it would not have been like it would not have been seen well if you didn't drink. I know people that work in like ad agencies where there's a lot of drinking culture around the work that you're doing, yeah? So I can see how it could be really difficult then as well. And yeah, I get as well, it also depends on like relationship with it. Do you know what I mean? There's some people, there's like, I do think that sobriety is like a bit of a lifestyle choice now, is being really elevated. So, you know, if you're doing it to be healthier, fitter, and in better shape, like there's less stigma around that, right? But I still think where the stigma probably hasn't changed is if you're coming out and saying, I've got an addiction problem and I really can't be anywhere near it. Like, I think there's still a lot of stigma around that.
100%.
Is my mic okay, by the way? Can you hear me?
I can hear you a little bit fuzzy picture-wise,
Yeah,
but now I can hear you.
yeah.
All right, as long as you can hear me. Piers just messaged me to say that it's a bit dodgy. Next question is going to be, do you think there's a rise in demand for sober networking and staff social events? I'm trying to mix it up. The people pleaser in me now is like, who do I go to first so that I don't upset everybody else? But Shakila, I'm just going to come to you. And then, Jess, obviously, you'll be first on the next question. You'll see that the people pleaser in me is very much here. But Shakila, we'll come to you first.
So I think the networking side of things is, again, it completely depends on where you're going to. So all I see now from, you know, people that are on influencer things and things like that is that the social networking places are happening at coffee shops whereby there is no alcohol that is present. I guess it's that happy medium for those that essentially do want to drink or can drink, as opposed to not to be able to have the choices there. There are lots of venues and places now that have zero alcohol options on their menus, and those menus are now getting longer and longer to give people more choice, which I think is the difference that historically wouldn't have always been there. I go to a fair few networking events, and you know, from working in bars and clubs and, you know, hospitality venues, I've not of recent seen that there is less options for those that drink in terms of going forward, which I would say is much nicer. But again, it depends on who the organizer is and whether they make that decision to go to that venue knowing that that venue in particular has lesser than another venue per se.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge demand coming up for sobriety, but again, it depends where you're going and who you're around as well. I think for me, where I'm in that industry a lot, I'm surrounded with a lot of clients from the sobriety industry. It feels, from my perspective, that it's everywhere, that there's, you know, you walk into the supermarkets, I go to events from social media and it's all alcohol free, and there's a lot of alcohol free options that are available now, a lot more than there ever has been, I think. But again, it's in different circles. I think it's completely different. I don't think it's consistent across the board. I do think there's a demand for it, and I think certain people are more comfortable in certain social networks asking for alcohol-free options, and I would say in others not so much. So I don't think there's a consistency of it, but I do feel like there is a huge shift, especially in the younger generations. I feel like the younger generations are really starting to see the health benefits of it. And I do think, yeah, it's definitely increasing, 100%.
Yeah. And Jess?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think from a personal perspective, the sober spaces are incredible. There is so much choice, even, right? If I'm thinking about sober spaces in the workplace, I am hearing there are some being introduced into workplaces. Whether the uptake is there is a different story. But it's been really comforting to hear that, yeah, some organisations and some people are really pushing for more sober events. I think, gosh, when I reflect on my experience, you mentioned ad agencies. That was my experience in recruitment. I don't think I could have gone into two different workplaces with regards to alcohol. But it was sad to see that when I think and reflect on sober spaces in the workplace, that a lot of the celebration and co-regulation was done around alcohol, late at night, weekends away. So I think there's definitely something to be considered here, especially like you say, in certain environments where there is more coffee shops. There's environments where it's not based on alcohol, just so everyone feels included, really.
Yeah, I always liken it to like healthy eating, right? There just needs to be the option, right? I think that's
Yeah,
got to be the best starting point, right? You shouldn't be able to throw like a staff do in the evening and the only option be alcohol, right? There should be a decent option for everybody if they do want to opt out. I
yeah.
do feel like I see that happening more. I do
Mm,
think that I see that happening more. And I think what you want is is an inclusive space in it, right? You want
exactly.
it to feel inclusive so that everybody can feel like uh, they've got a choice.
Make it a
Um,
dietary requirement.
yeah, well,
Yeah,
but it should be that, isn't it? Like it
yeah,
should be that. I mean, I don't know, like if you could actually bring in a proper policy where it's like that, because they could always just say, well, it's tap water. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think it's like I do, but like I mean, because I won't drink non-alcoholic drinks.
No,
yeah,
I'm the same.
Yeah.
So I could sort of, it's like, how far do you want to go with it? Because I'll be
Yeah.
like, I want a decent drink that ain't alcoholic at all, that don't even pretend to be one. Yeah. So
yeah.
what are you doing for me? So there has to be an end point. You know what I mean?
That's like the
Um,
argument, isn't it, with like veganism and pretend or fake meat or vegan chicken nuggets. That's the equivalent of, uh,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing with me as somebody who's sober is that because I got sober a long time ago, alcohol-free drinks were not really a thing. And actually, in the recovery communities when I got sober, it was really frowned upon to drink non-alcoholic beers back
Wow.
then. It's
Yeah.
not anymore, but back then it was seen like, well, you either quit or you don't. Don't be some
Mm,
sort of middle ground. So because it was always like that for me, it would feel like I was going backwards slightly if I was to change it now. So I've never just, plus I never liked beer. Um, but you get non-alcoholic spirits. Um, I'm going to mix it up a little bit, Jess. I'm going to come to you. So I
yeah.
want you to start thinking now. And I'm going off script completely. So if
Oh,
you have
good.
read the questions, I'm not reading them anymore. Um, as a COA, because everybody here is a COA, right? What do you think is the most, the COA trait of yours that impacts you in the workplace the most?
Oh, the most.
Or any, you can give us anyone. It doesn't have to be a competition for the worst. But what's the first one that comes to your mind?
Just masking.
Yeah.
Masking.
How
Just,
does that show up? Yeah.
well, like, I'll give an example. Like, I was called sunshine in the workplace. In all the places I've been, it was like, oh, you're sunshine. You just like, you're the one that everyone comes to with their problems. You know, you're always smiling. And like, underneath it, it was like that swan thing. You know, my feet are like, and like, I'm just battling with perfectionism, like low self-worth, like overgiving. And just how exhausting it was to pretend I was something that I wasn't,
Mm.
in the fear that I was going to get caught out, someone was going to sack me. I was obsessed with being sacked. What the hell? I'd never been sacked in my life. But like, it was just like this chaos internally. And then on the outside, it was just this like, this is how I have to be. And of course, that was who I had to be in my family home. It was just playing out in the workplace. But yeah, definitely the exhaustion of masking. And then quite literally, my way of coping was with alcohol. So it was like, have coffee in the morning, go to work, have wine in the evening, and repeat. And the exhausting nature of that, of like the lifestyle that I was also living, yeah, it was just complete masking. And it's taken me so long to understand A, what the masks are, and to feel safe enough to take them off, really.
Yeah. Sarah?
Hands down, people pleasing. I
Mm.
absolute hands down. It is, do you know, and I'm really trying to work on it because it massively impacts everything. Taking on more than I should, coming in when I shouldn't be. And I'll give you an example because looking at these questions and looking at the theme of what we're talking about today had me reflect on working. I used to work in the offices in the NHS when my dad was alive. And when my dad, towards the end of his life, when he died, and he was in A&E and we'd admitted him into A&E, we knew it was quite bad. And I got a phone call that evening, the night before work, to say that dad was in intensive care. And again, I'm like, everything's fine, I'm being dramatic, I'm overthinking this, I'm overanalyzing everything, I'm going to go into work tomorrow because I don't want to upset my boss. I don't want to call in sick because yesterday I left early because he was in hospital. So I don't want to be that employee that's always asking to take time off for problems. And I didn't want to bring my problems to work, like as though I could magically leave them at the door when I walked in. And I went into work the day my dad died. I was in the workplace because I didn't want to call in sick and upset my boss. And that kind of people-pleasing element in me, I carry that forward with everything. And it's something I would say has probably hindered me more, because there's certain elements where, you know, I was in a situation a few weeks ago where I had to have a really difficult conversation with somebody, and I didn't want to upset them. So I knew what I needed to say, and I knew they were being unreasonable in their demands and what they were asking for, but I didn't want to upset them. So it was a real difficult, it's that side of it, I would say, is a massive, and my husband picks up on it. He says to me all the time recently, he says, you're a big people pleaser. You know, we need to work on that. We need to get to the bottom of that. He went, that's the COA stuff, isn't it? Because he's like really super invested in it at the moment. So yeah, I would say that 100%. And it's massively had an impact. Still does.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And Shakila?
I guess for me, probably the imposter syndrome on this of that I probably made an image of what I think I should be in my head, and I refuse to let myself be anything less than that. So although that is the main part, it comes with a lot of things. So like I'm personally saying that my addictive personality shows through in my day-to-day life, because I'm just addicted to being the better version of myself. What that version is yet, I still have no idea. However, I will fight and fight each day until I get there. And I guess, you know, there's lots of stuff that comes into it. I'm someone who likes to be noticed for something that I've done before I've had to tell someone I've done it. So like for me, it's making sure that I've done stuff before someone has asked me to, and that I've done it. You know, if I make a mistake, I do get a bit upset with myself because I feel guilty that I've made a mistake, even though I know deep down I'm human, and we're all guilty of making mistakes because that are humans, and humans make error. And you know, none of them have been huge errors or anything like that, but I think it's like that little bit of a knock-on effect where I get myself up to a sort of level of where I think I am, and then that small thing will happen, and then it knocks me back down a peg or two. And so I think I'm just guilty of constantly chasing something that I don't even know exists.
Yeah, relatable. I relate to all of them, and I think like for me, the one that jumped out to me when I asked the question for me was people pleasing. And I know like everybody's talked about that, but like, you know, not being able to say no or tell people that I don't have the capacity to do something, or that I don't want to do it, right? Like I really struggle with that. And I think that, just to add another one in, my absolute terror of any kind of confrontation means that I often don't get my needs met adequately in anything that I do. Like, but at work it's the same, yeah. Because I'm worried about upsetting everybody else, and I'm happy to sit in however much discomfort I have to make sure that everybody else is all right. And if they're all right, I can deal with however I feel, you know, and that's caused me a lot of problems in my working life, that's for sure.
God. We could do like a COA bingo here. Like I relate to every single one, everything in the chat. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Piers has said as well, living with the chaos and trying to keep it together. One of the positive traits, and maybe we'll ask this question. All right, let's ask this question. Because Piers has said living with the chaos and trying to keep it all together. What I am bloody good at is when there's a crisis and everyone's panicking, I'll kick into gear and you want me on your side, yeah? I'm in my element. I relax, yeah? I relax. When
I feel the
chaos.
most relaxed in those situations.
Yeah, so I'll throw it to you, Sarah, first then, as you spoke. Like, are there any of the traits of being a COA, or traits that you feel like have come from being a COA, that you think have a positive effect on your work life?
I think the resilience side of it, and working under pressure, you know, like, I think that when you're faced with a problem, I'm like, oh, right, okay, how are we going to get around this? And I go into like hyper focus on how we can come back with a solution to fix the problem. A little bit of a fixer. And there's a toxic trait to that as well, but there's also a great side to it because I'm great at fixing things. I'm actually known for it. Like, I'm always told, if Sarah ever comes across a problem and wants to find a way out of it, she'll always find a way. She always finds a way around it, and that's because I've just been brought up like that. I was the eldest child. I was that hero child. I was the rescuer, the one to fix everything, to bring everybody back together, to always put everybody's needs before my own. And I would say that actually shines through in work.
Yeah.
And I always find a way around. So it's got its pros and its cons, isn't it?
Yeah, but isn't that like every trait? Yeah, I do think
Yeah.
that the journey for me has been about how do I, some of the traits of being a COA that feel crunchy or even that they've reached toxic levels, when I get them, how do I soften them and use them to my advantage, right?
Yeah.
How do I create a life with these traits that like feels good? Shakila, what is there any that jumped out for you?
I guess similar to what Sarah just said in terms of the art of feeling like you can do anything, because I feel like what I've come through and what I've done, all of those tips and tricks I've learned to, how to sort of regulate how I feel, how to understand a situation, how to read a room, how to understand when someone has got to a certain level. So I can normally tell when someone's pushed too far. So, it's like the little things, like when you're making a banter joke with a friend. I can quite often tell the line right before someone's blown their head off because I can sense those sorts of things that people have. So I can see when they're butting up and I can see when things have gone too far. And it's being able to intercept at that point, which, I think from similar to what Sarah said, my industry is sales. So I absolutely flourish where I am because it's high turnover, it's high pressure, it's, what's next, what's next. I'm constantly thinking of the next thing, which has done wonders for me because it's something that I've got and it's something I honestly wouldn't change if I could go back and change anyway. But I've been able to essentially build a career out of it, which I just think is amazing.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I love that. Jess?
Oh wow, relate to so much. I think I wouldn't have survived 15 years in recruitment had I not been a COA. I know that hands down, right? But oh my God, I always told myself I didn't want to be a leader, like for the exact reasons we've said. Can't do conflict, don't want to have confrontation, like people pleasing, all of that. But actually, what I realised over time, and when I took the roles I did, was actually we have a superpower, and I think that ability to think steps ahead, that ability to emotionally attune when we're not rescuing and we don't get enmeshed and we have boundaries, like we are the most incredible leaders. What that doesn't have to mean like a workplace leader, it's a leader in the world, right? And I think, my God, you want a COA by your side in the apocalypse. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, yeah. You want a COA by your side in the apocalypse, but you don't want a COA by your side if you've forgotten a pen or something small.
Yeah, God no, God
You've
no.
made a typo.
I can't cope. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's easy to get caught up in like a lot of these, like the negative sort of side of some of these traits that we picked up. But like, even when I look at what I do now, people ask me sometimes like, how have you managed to like build some of the stuff that you've done? And it like the truthful answer is I I'm trying to escape myself all of the time. So I build these amazing things because I don't feel very comfortable in my own skin. So I'm like, I need to be busy, right? And like, I do just think that sometimes it's not the traits that are the problem. It's the fact that we feel shame that we have these traits, And it's sometimes just like, how do I build a life and create a world for myself that lends itself to some of these traits, that may be with me forever. And then, like I say, to just soften them, to just soften some of these traits so that they're not all consuming and I don't feel ran by them or led by them. The next question is, this is an interesting one. In fact, let me give you a little anecdote of when I first spoke on TV for Nacoa. I still worked in a factory and I worked on the shop floor in the factory, which is predominantly male. Say predominantly, on the shop floor there wasn't a female, it was all men. And I remember I spoke on like BBC Breakfast or something on the weekend, Joe. And one of the first men to approach me when I went back to work, whenever it was the next day, said, oh, it was really endearing, right? That's the key point. Said to me, your dad wanted shooting before he had kids. And he thought he was saying something nice to me, this fella, right? Because he thought he was like letting me know that he thought my dad was not a great person because of who he was and when he, you know, and some of the things that happened. I was fairly robust by that time, right? So, you know, it didn't, I sort of saw it for what it was. But I'm interested to this one. Shakila, I want to come to you first, right? How comfortable do you feel talking about being a COA in the workplace? Is it something you're open about?
Being completely honest, no. So I was someone who, for all this time, pretended that my mum didn't exist. So it wasn't until I actually found Nacoa, ironically, and the reason I found her because I was lucky enough to get onto the London Marathon last year. Well, this year just gone. And I was looking for an addiction charity because various sporting things. Like I've had a boxing match for charity as well. And I've always liked the idea of addiction because it's genuinely the only thing that I've been passionate about. However, when I found Nacoa, I sort of had to share my story to entice people in to sponsor because, you know, as you'll all be aware, as soon as you mention it's addiction, nobody wants to hear anything about it. And people
Yeah.
have that stigma of, you know, well, it's their own fault. And I think my story resonates with Nacoa and everything that it's about. And I think that until I had that moment, so I sent out an email to obviously both the whole office that I worked at, shared on LinkedIn, all sorts. And it was only after the amount of replies and messages I had from people saying like it was amazing, I could never have told it. That was sort of the story that you had. That now it is something that I feel comfortable talking about. It is something that I post about regularly, you know, even on my own social media posts and things like that. It wasn't until my mum died that I actually felt like I had a reason to talk about it. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but I think I had a mum who was still around, so I didn't have a reason. Or for me, I'd lost my mum years before she passed away because her addiction was so bad that our relationship had just completely deteriorated and was non-existent. That it was the moment that she died, and I thought to myself, there's no coming back from this. That I thought to myself, now I have to tell people why she died. You know, my mum was still young; she was only 50 odd, so it's taken me up until now to feel comfortable. And I think the amount of people that once they hear your story and they link addiction to a person, that they then it becomes more of a sensitive subject as opposed to because I think the biggest misconception I think with alcohol and addiction is that it's always these people that you find homeless on the street. And we'll all know that there couldn't be further from the truth. And quite often, most people are functional alcoholics or addicts for quite some time before it gets to that stage. That it's the understanding that people are there to listen to your story without feeling like you're burdening them for it. And so now, yeah, much more comfortable. And I feel like because of the sort of personality I have, I'm able to pass it off as a joke if I feel like I've said it to the wrong person. And I know that
Yeah.
again sounds silly, but I can quite quickly laugh it off and change the subject should I have approached something. Because again, like you said, you know, Nacoa's stats are 1 in 5 children are, you know, parents of affected by their parents drinking. That I completely understand the sensitivity of me sharing my story can also be a trigger warning to somebody else. So even when I told people, there were lots of people that said, "Oh, this is amazing," like I had no idea, and obviously this is a really sad story. But there are lots of messages I got to say I experienced the same thing, which I think again is so nice to have that connection where you feel like you're not the only one, and that it didn't just happen to me. But also the comfortability that they felt comfortable enough to then talk to me because I've mentioned it first. So it's like
Yeah.
a much nicer way around it. But had I not volunteered for Nacoa, I probably still to this day would nobody would have known because I would have been still slightly embarrassed of it,
Yeah.
which I know I shouldn't be. But
Yeah, no, but it makes sense, right? Like, of course, like it makes sense that you feel that way. Jess, what about you?
I think when I reflect on my corporate experience, I would either tell someone because I was drunk after work down the pub and I've overshared, like, and then immediately regretted it and gone, oh my God, what have I done? Or I would have to share with someone because there would be a crisis affecting my working day. So, like, my dad turning up drunk in reception, or care workers ringing where I had to tell a boss. It was the only real time I think I shared, but I don't think I went into detail. Someone mentioned in the chat there about downplaying. I think I was like, oh, it's fine though, just leave it with me, I'll be back in 10 kind of thing. I find it easier now. I work for myself, and to go into a workplace and share my story or share it online. One thing that I did feel safe to share when I was in the corporate world, I'd got a director that I was reporting to at the time, and he was very open about his recovery journey. And I remember in a one-to-one saying to him, I'm concerned about my drinking. And I'm concerned because my dad's an alcoholic. But that was the first time I'd ever really been that vulnerable. I think it was all very cloak and dagger, because when I was working for someone else, there was a risk of me being sacked. That was one of my biggest fears. So it was just very like pushed down, 100%.
Yeah. Sarah?
I mean, reflecting back, I used to be really scared to talk about it, really embarrassed, and I would tell people that my dad died from a heart attack. But then I don't know where it come from. I think there's so many comments from people where they'd say, your dad did it to himself, he only had himself to blame. And yeah, there's an element of that is true. My dad did have a responsibility, but it's not nice hearing it. I didn't want to hear that about him. So I don't know where it came from. I kind of just embraced it and become really comfortable with talking about it, and would talk about it to anyone who would listen. And I've developed, I knew that preaching about it in an aggressive way was never going to land well with people. So I would always try and do it in such a way that would try and educate and change people's perspectives. But then that led to me becoming obsessed with fighting and tackling stigma. I was so obsessed with it. I was blaming the stigma for everything. The problem, stigma, that is true. Stigma is a problem. It is an issue. But recently, over the last 12 months, I've also learned to sit comfortably with it and acknowledge that my reaction to that stigma might be affecting me too much. And it says more about myself and how secure I am with it. And I'm really struggling to articulate myself, but when I really sat with it and felt comfortable and owned the story and kind of embraced that story and just thought, you know what, this is my story, this is what happened. I don't want to feel embarrassed about it anymore. I'm done. I don't want to feel ashamed about that. I don't want to associate that with shame and stigma and all these horrible things, and to actually sit and own it and talk about it vulnerably without feeling embarrassed or without feeling like I'm too much. That's been quite a liberating feeling. But I would, at the beginning, I was absolutely terrified of opening up about it. Whereas now well, you know me, I'll sit and I'll talk about it all day. If somebody wants to listen, I'll talk about it. And I'm super comfortable with it now. But it's taken a lot of work for me to get to that point as well. And it's still taking work. I'm not done. I probably won't ever be. But I'm learning to accept and to sit with it.
Yeah. There's this big thing about stigma with like the fact that like it's so rooted in shame as well. So I've always said a lot of my big fear of stigma was driven by the fact that I judged myself so harshly. I just assumed that everybody that I speak to would judge me the same. So I had like a big fear of stigma, when actually a lot of what I've found when I've shared my story is like, and I know like you say, it's important to talk about stigma, but I think it's also important as well that to talk about, I get such a positive reaction from a lot of people for being open about not just what I experienced with my dad, but things in general. Like there's a lot of good, positive reaction as well. I mean, like personally, the reaction I hate the most when I hate being over cared for about it. That's what turns me off. You know, when people go, oh, that must be so hard for you. I get a bit like, not as hard as dealing with you being like that. So don't be like, you know what I mean? Like, I get a bit, because I think, again, as a COA, I think I can sometimes be a little bit like, I want you to hear me, but I also, like, you know, come near me and help me and support me, but also stay away from me, you know? Like, so I get caught in that, like, you can't really win with me if you're not careful either.
But don't you find that kind of response as well is almost lip service? And because you're that highly sensitive, you're highly attuned. Sometimes I listen to certain people, and I'm just sat there nodding, going, "You're just telling me what you think you should be telling me, and what you think I want to hear." Like, if we're gonna have a conversation, let's get real about it. Let's
Yeah.
actually let's push all that stuff aside about that must be really hard. Yeah, it was. It was hard.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't need to be reminded, but I don't know that.
I'd even go as far as to say some people are not just paying lip service, but some people use it to position themselves in a bit more of a place of power than you. So when they
Yeah,
Yeah.
go,
yeah,
oh, that must be so horrible for you. It's sort they're almost separating themselves to go. It's like, I'm slightly better than you. So that's
yeah,
probably like
Yeah.
more stigma than anything, you know?
Yeah. I think it's that psychological safety that we almost need to find in ourselves as a COA to be able to receive caring words, because sometimes you're going to filter it through that, like you say, that part of you that's like, no. And I know I've got that, where it's like I've got this various different armor that doesn't want me to talk or feel anything, as we know, right? So I think there is, yeah, when people encourage someone to talk and be vulnerable, it's like it's a two-way street, isn't it? You kind of need that psychological safety on that side, but we need to be safe enough to actually receive the love and
I
care
feel
that some
like
people want to give, you know?
I feel like as well with some people as well, it's how do you how do you articulate a response that one isn't patronizing, which sometimes those ones come across like, but then one thing I have learned is how can you expect someone to understand something that they've never been through? For us, being a child of an alcoholic is something that has ingrained with us and is something that has, shaped the people that we are today. But again, between the four of us, every single one of our experiences are going to be completely different. And I think that instead of, making people feel like that, because once you open that conversation and you open that sort of can of worms, per se, the other person doesn't know what to do either. So it's how
Yeah.
do we educate people to be able to handle those conversations in a way to be able to say, oh, okay, that, you know, what do you say then other than, oh no, that's horrible. And I guess it's similar to, anytime we ever receive a bad news or a bad story from someone, quite often we'll be different because we're more aware of when we tell our story and the responses that we would like to receive. But for someone who hasn't experienced any form of trauma or hardship or anything so far, for them, they probably don't actually know how to handle it.
Yeah.
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 It's so important, isn't it, to try and have empathy for like other people's experiences. I think you make such a good point
Yeah.
about like you have to remember like that if they haven't experienced it, why would they understand it? And like, do we really want them to fully understand it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
horrible. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
There's that there's that balance to be had because we don't want to create. I say we. I don't want anybody to feel like they're walking on eggshells around me
No.
either. Like I don't. If they want to make jokes about alcohol because they don't really know how awful it can be, like I don't want them to feel like, oh, I can't do that around Josh because, I've got, one of my COA traits is that I've got like a good dark sense of humor, right? So like how do you hold space for all of those things? How do I? Because I do think there's something to be said as well for the way that we share our stories. We all need to like support each other. Because when I first started sharing publicly, I definitely got addicted to like the positive reaction from people. So
Yeah.
then I like just ran around like feeding everybody my deep story because I realized it was a good way to get like seen. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
there's
got
a
accused
balance
of
to be had.
trauma dumping when I did that.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah,
in many
which I
ways, I'm
was doing
probably,
really.
which I was just about to say, that's what I did do for a year or so.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
I remember the first ever corporate talk I did was they brought me in for an hour. It was the first one I ever did, and I just spent the whole hour just dumping my story for the first time ever to an audience. And I remember finishing, and they're just looking at me, and they were like, what are we supposed to do with that? Like, yeah, okay. So then I had to learn, and that kind of leads quite nicely actually into the next question, and I'll come to you, Jess, first maybe. What do you think workplaces can do to better support COAs?
It's a great question. I think we've just touched on it there about where the responsibility really lies. I don't think it should be on the workplace completely.
No, I agree.
I think there's so much they can do. We touched on it. It's almost like, let's make this as simple as it can be for a COA when they are ready. We don't want to do the whole, come on, force people to talk when they're not ready. We equally don't want to force people to listen when they don't have the skill set. So, okay, two-pronged approach for me. The alcohol-free drinks, amazing. Making sure that people can be mindful of commenting on people's drink choices. I think workplaces are introducing more workshops, more talks, which is amazing. Personally, for me, it's what we talked about then, and the ability to hold space. The amount of leaders and managers that I've seen within the workplace that got their role because of their performance rather than the ability to lead is problematic sometimes, right? So I think helping leaders to develop that psychological safety where they can hold space without wanting to make someone feel better, fix it, the ability to get clear consent. Like, do you want to share something and do you want a response? Do you want a solution, or do you just want a safe space to share it? So I think there is some leadership training that workplaces can do to help leaders be better space holders, first and foremost. I think there is a responsibility on the COA to find their own psychological safety, to feel safe enough to share, to work out for them who is a safe person. Safe, can they really be safe? But who are the people that they feel they can share with? Like, have you got leaders that you can challenge and say, look, I'm really not happy with how we're running events. I feel like, can I introduce this idea that's going to be more inclusive for sober people? Like, you need to be able to have that psychological safety as a foundation. But I think for COAs where we can be so armoured, you know, it's not just a case of workplaces making it safe enough to share. It's that COA trusting themselves enough to go, right, this is where I'm going to go with my stuff, or I'm not going to take it to work. I'm going to take it to my peer support space outside of work. Or I'm going to take it to my coach or my therapist. I think hopefully that makes sense. But I think the psychological safety from a leadership perspective, so important. First for me.
Yeah. Are you itching to come in there, Shakila?
So sorry. So I agree completely with everything that you've just said in terms of the safe space. Yes, I agree. I also think that for people that they should, the onus on us to be able to share our story because, like you said, as part of being a COA, you are someone who's able to mask things and you're able to hide things, which means that, we can't be expected that our, line managers or people within the company that we work at who, may have never experienced any form of issues with addiction or anything like that, be aware of what those triggers may be or what those warning signs are. But it's the ability to be able to have that space and for the people to notice when something isn't okay. So just because we are children of alcoholics doesn't necessarily mean everything revolves around sort of alcohol per se, but it's the understanding of being able to tell, what we are when we can tell as someone slightly off key from what they normally are. It's the leadership skills to be able to pick up on that because that's where the conversation starts. A child of an alcoholic needs to be able to feel comfortable to talk, but there needs to be sort of a guideline or a way into that sort of conversation. Because unless you're like us who, are very much happy to trauma dump per se on anyone who will listen, there are lots of people out there who, quite frankly, still think they're the only person in the world that's experiencing that because they haven't been able to have that inclusivity. They haven't been able to have that comfort or that safety blanket where they can speak freely on their story without fear of judgment or without fear of something coming around the corner and people changing. Because I think for me, my worry was that people were going to see me as weak once I told my story. So I think
Yeah.
it's the understanding of how to tell that story and still feel as strong as I was when nobody knew that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful. Yeah. Sarah?
I agree with absolutely everything Jess and Shakila have said, especially with the emphasis placed on like the responsibility on the COA to find what works for them, because we can't put everything on the employer. But I think one thing that I will add, and I'm not saying that every employer does this, but what I've seen a lot of in my corporate career has been lip service to awareness campaigns, to awareness weeks like this. These awareness weeks are absolutely brilliant. I'm not taking that away from them. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing it, because they absolutely are. They give a lot of space, and they hold a lot of space for people to come forward. They raise awareness, which is absolutely what we need in the workplace. We need to be raising awareness so people feel that they can come forward. But what I have seen a lot of in the past is that we'll hype up all of this, like social media campaigns, leaflets, presentations, people coming in, delivering talks, and then a week or two later it's forgotten about and it's silent again. And that is what my biggest bugbear with the campaigns and awareness side of things is that sometimes it feels like it's lip service for a marketing opportunity. I'm not saying that's for everywhere, but sometimes that's what really grinds me with corporate awareness days. It's great that they're done, but I would love to see them practicing what they preach.
Yeah, I do think like looking at alcohol awareness in general, I do think there's still a lot that corporates could be doing in terms of just like addressing the general relationship to alcohol in general. I mean, I'm always like a little bit cautious when I'm speaking from a COA perspective or a Nacoa perspective, to like focus on alcohol itself, because I think if you look, once we've got into the kind of nitty gritty of what we're talking about today, we've barely mentioned alcohol, right? We're talking about traits. We're talking about like, ways that we show up as a result of what we're doing. But like, there's some, Nacoa do some great leaflets and stuff like that. Like all of these things can have a big impact. Like when, I think Shakila, you like a prime example is you got to run the marathon and ended up choosing Nacoa, like people shouldn't underestimate the impacts of that. And there's lots of times when companies are picking charities to raise money for or to raise awareness for just because they need to find a charity. And I would encourage companies to not always go to the big guns, like there's lots of big charities out there and it's great. And I'm not saying don't support them, but do a bit of research. Is there something that we could do to support an organization, a smaller charity, that are doing something for more of a sort of niche subject, for want of a better term, as maybe this isn't unique, but there's a company called TMS that I've done some work with, and they do a day every month, or every month, and it's called like, I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to butcher the hell out of it, but it's something like personal stories or something like that. And everybody that works there has the opportunity to do a presentation on something about their life. And so some people will do, like, I remember I was told that they had somebody who had grown up in a rural part of Poland, right? And so they talked about the cultural things that meant for them. And like, it gives everybody a platform once a month to stand up and say, here's who I am and here's like my experience. And these things can be massive, because I do think that for COAs, we don't need a lot necessarily in our workplace. I'd argue some of us probably want to go to work and work be our escape, where we don't have to think about it, like, so we don't necessarily always need a lot or big things, but a bit of awareness can go a long way in that respect.
Love that.
We are coming close to time, so I'm looking here and I don't feel like I have like a powerful moral question to ask, so I'm stalling a little bit while I think of one, because that's what I want to do. We're going to go round. I'm going to start at you, Jess, then we'll go to Sarah, and then we'll go to Shakila. And the question is going to be, if somebody has just realized that being a COA is really negatively affecting them in their workplace, what should they do? The first thing that they should do. Jess, I've put you on the spot because you're first.
Okay. If they first find it impacting their at work, I think it comes back to finding someone that is safe enough for you to explore the options with. I think sometimes COAs, parts of COAs, little versions of us inside can feel super powerless and helpless. It clouds our ability to realize we have choice. And being able to flesh out with whether it's a trusted facilitator, practitioner, therapist, coach, whoever, or a friend that you trust, like being able to realize there are options for me and there is support for me. I don't need to just battle this alone. And it doesn't mean that I haven't stuck here forever, right? If this doesn't work for me, what are my options to find an environment that's going to support me through this chapter of my life? So for me, it's recognizing a space where I can go to, where I can realize there are options, there are choice. I'm not stuck, and I'm not that powerless little child that was at home feeling that way.
Yeah, good answer. Sarah?
Well, I think there's so many answers to this question. But I think, I mean, I'm not a wellbeing professional. I'm not an expert. So, but coming from a lived experience perspective, and from what it was like for me, and the first thing that I needed to understand before I even accessed any kind of support was that I weren't being disloyal for asking for help or for talking about it. I used to be obsessed with keeping this secret and thinking that, you know, if I talk about this, then I'm letting my dad down, I'm letting the family down, I'm bringing shame upon the family, I'm letting everybody know what we're going through. What if I'm being dramatic? What if it's not that bad? So I think it's the very first step I had to take before I could even access any kind of support was that I am not disloyal, and this has affected me as much as it's affected my dad. I'm not being dramatic. So I suppose I had to stop gaslighting myself in that I'm eligible for help too. I'm worthy of that help too, and I'm not letting my dad down by doing it.
Yeah, really good answer. Yeah. And Shakila?
I think for me, I mean, this is going to sound completely different, but I think for me, it's overcomplicating it. And I know that sounds like a really silly thing to say, but I think for most people, you know, talking to someone, I think, is the hardest part. And for me, one thing I've always struggled with is getting my words out in the right order at the right time frame. So simplify it by writing it down. Writing it down, collating your thoughts, understanding exactly what it is that you feel, so that then when you can talk to someone, whether it be that you actually then decide to go and, you know, verbally say that to someone, or whether you know, sit behind an email and you press send, it doesn't matter how you talk to someone, in whatever way which makes you feel the most comfortable. It's, you know, simplifying it down to the way that you know that you can get your message across. Because I think it's too easy for people to say, oh, well, talk to someone, because when you get there, you go all shy, you get all embarrassed, someone's eyes are beaming straight at yours, you know, your heart's pounding and you feel sick, and you all of a sudden what you've said, what you've wanted to say and what you have said are two completely different things. But I think, you know, being able to write it down, pinpoint exactly every single thing, you know, proofreading it, checking that you've got it all there, and then deciding on which method of communication style is best suited for you to be able to get that across, I think is the big thing.
Love
Yeah,
that.
great. Yeah, really good answer. Really important as well. And I guess like I would like summarize all of that as well by saying be sure to like engage with, and this isn't just to promote. I want to highlight a point I'm trying to make. It's not just to promote Nacoa's work, right? But don't be afraid to use Nacoa, to email Nacoa, to phone them, to engage in the support with Nacoa, because I think as particularly as adult COAs, I think we often look at things like Nacoa and think to ourselves, how do I help everybody and how do I become one of the somebody in Nacoa that's saving everybody, right? I know I'm very guilty of this, right? And I forget to go, Nacoa's also there for me as a COA as well. Like, don't forget to use Nacoa as a COA and use the services properly and engage with them, you know. Like Shakila just said, if you need to write the email, Nacoa will help you write an email. Do you know what I mean? Like, and they'll have people that will really know what they're talking about and know how to adequately support you if you need that. And there's, you know, the Nacoa support system now is just so amazing. There's so many things, you know. Have an evening where you sit and read some of the stories and find someone that you really resonate with. You know, these things can be so important. I don't think we should forget that. Listen, we have come to the hour. I'm going to come round to Shakila first, then Sarah, then Jess, and you can give us a parting sentence or two. It can
Oh
just
God.
be thank you, or it can be something really deep and profound. I'll leave it up to you. Shakila first.
So thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me speak freely, and for making me, well, for allowing me to use my story in a positive light. Hoping that it resonates with whoever, wherever, whenever.
Amazing. I'm going to take that as the profound and deep option. So Sarah, let's come to you as well.
God, I'm literally, I don't even know, I don't even know what to say. Put me on the spot. Just thank you for having me. You know, it's always a pleasure to come on here. And when Jess, when you messaged me yesterday and said, looking really forward to like seeing you and everything, and I thought, yeah, me too. I can't wait for this. And I thought, oh, should I put that? Should I say I can't wait to talk about this? I can't wait to have this conversation. And then I start overthinking things and overcomplicating things. But it, you know, it's a bittersweet thing to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm really super comfortable talking about my dad. I love the fact that my dad's story, our story, those difficult experiences that we had growing up can now help other people, as cliche as that sounds. But just having that voice and being able to have that platform to share these experiences so other people feel heard and not alone, I think that's what these lives, that's what Nacoa, that's what the community is about. And you don't have to do that. People, I think a lot of people feel like when they start Nacoa, they have to start sharing their story. And they absolutely, that you don't have to do that. You really don't. But for me, just being able to share it, just being able to talk about it, feels that it is helping somebody. And it's also removing that shame and stigma attached to my dad. And I laughed at that the other day when I spoke about it, because I thought there's an irony to that. How when my dad was alive, how I was constantly trying to rescue him. And even now he's gone, I'm still trying to rescue him by protecting his reputation, by advocating against stigmas attached to alcohol addiction. So
Yeah.
there is such an irony to that. But I love the Nacoa community. Absolutely adore everyone. It feels like a family, and I love it. I just love it. Not that I love why I'm part of it, but you know what I mean.
I get it. And can confirm that Sarah has also gone profound, so no pressure for you, Jess, as we come to you.
No, I mean, thank you, Nacoa, first and foremost, for asking me to be part of this. Thank you for you guys for making this such a wonderful conversation. And, you know, the reality is for me as a COA, right, when I'm doing a lot of life in with a lot of other people, I lose the power sometimes of like being around my aliens, as I call it, like my COA aliens. Like, you know what I mean? Like the people that just get it, man. And it just like reinforces my why I share to crickets and people that look deeply uncomfortable. Like, because it's not just hopefully going to help someone, but it helps these little ones inside of me have a corrective experience and be like, wow, I'm using my experience and there's a gold side of that. So just thank you. It's been wonderful, genuinely.
Amazing. And you went profound as well.
No pressure.
I haven't got anything profound to add. I just want to say just thank you. I think these conversations, you know, the more conversations that we can have like this, the better. You know, it's sort of you know, I definitely feel like having been involved with Nacoa for some years now, the needle has moved a lot, you know. It's moved a hell of a lot from where it was. And so, you know, imagine if we've got this far in this many years, imagine where we could be in the next few years if everybody keeps showing up and we keep doing these things. So, yeah, thanks for everybody that came in, everybody that listened, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.